Hi, and welcome to the Becoming Trauma-Informed podcast, where we help you understand how your past painful experiences are affecting your current reality and how you can shift those so you can create your desired future. I'm Dr. Lee, and both myself and our team at the Institute for Trauma and Psychological Safety are excited to support you on your journey. We talk about all the things on this podcast. No topic gets left uncovered. So, extending a content warning to you before we get started. If you notice yourself getting activated while listening, invitation to take care of yourself and to pause, skip ahead a bit, or just check out another episode. Let's dive in.
I'm usually super nervous before a podcast, but I woke up this morning and I was like, oh, sweet. Yeah, today's that podcast day. And I was like, I feel so calm about this because it's Lee.
Oh my gosh. I want to keep that in here. Let's just start, actually, if that's cool with you. Okay. Yeah. Hey, everybody. The most random intro to a podcast ever. But I was like, oh, I like that. I want to keep that. Because actually, that's like one of the things that we really try to foster on this podcast is like, don't be nervous. Just come and be yourself, right? Like drop the masks. We were just talking about right before this started, ADHD diagnosis, neurodivergency diagnoses, like the masks that we wear in order. And I think this relates so much to what we're going to talk about today, which is really gorgeous. So hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode. I have the fabulous Brittany Bowman here with me today. Brittany, we're going to actually talk about Brittany's main business, which is a phenomenal thing. And I'm actually a client of hers. I've used some of her techniques around clutter and organization and just really creating a life that feels regulated around you, like with your stuff. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that you are our community experience manager in our free Facebook group and in our trips program. You are like our liaison. You make sure everyone's taken care of. And so I love your multi-potentialiteness because you're like me. We do all the things. And I just wanted people to know that, like, if they fall in love with you through this podcast, which they probably will, they can also come spend time with you at the Institute because you are there with us too.
Yes. And I would love to see everyone's beautiful face there.
Yes. So I was super stoked when our operations director, Sarah, who I have to also have on here because she's phenomenal. She and I were chatting and she's like, I think you should have Brittany. Like we were chatting about it. And Brittany needs to come on the podcast and talk about clutter and organization and all of that. And I was like, oh, yes. So I'm just stoked that y'all were having the conversation about this because I think this might be one of the most normalized traumatic places for humans is organization.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So before I get even further into this, how do you describe the work that you do? I mean, I'm not going to have you do like an elevator pitch, but what if someone's like, hey, what do you do around clutter and organization? Like, how do you describe what you do?
Yeah. My main goal when I work with anyone is to get them to change the way they talk to themselves about the clutter. Because when you change the way that you talk, then your actions change, right? And your thoughts and feelings are evolving. So I try to get my clients to break down all the stories around why they're hanging on to what they're hanging on to, or why they continue to purchase things that they don't want, don't need, whatever. And I try to get them to just reframe all of that. And my favorite part is all of these aha moments when people are like, oh my gosh, I feel so much lighter. Or I feel so silly. I don't know why I was holding on to those things. It's because we're just like on autopilot and we just do, and we don't necessarily think through our actions when it comes to clutter.
Yeah. And the thing that I think about, there's like two big places, categories, maybe. And, a lot of organization is like putting things into categories. I kind of see this in two categories. There is the keeping yourself organized and keeping your shit organized.
Yeah, very much so.
And I have found that I like to keep things very organized. And that is because I'm actually not an organized person, right? So it's almost like an over response of like, okay, I'm going to keep track of where everything goes and I'm going to make my bed exactly this way. And I'm going to do these things because if I don't have those things in place, things go bad very quickly.
Yep. I get that.
And then I'm married to a human who we both have ADHD. And it's so fascinating how different it is because his is more inattentive and mine is more impulsive. So I learned like my impulsivity was bad. So I had to like put all this structure around it in order to mask it up and cover it up. He doesn't pay attention to where he's putting things, right? Out of sight, out of mind. And so like he will just pile stuff up. He can always find a use for stuff too. So us moving in together and living together at first was like really hard.
Yeah.
And I never understood his propensity to clutter until I realized he and I actually have the same organizational tendencies. It's just we were socialized to look at them differently.
Yeah. And I'm sure when you moved in together, you didn't have all of these tools for evaluating what might be going on under the surface, right?
No, I was just like, this dude is like messy as hell. like I remember seeing his dorm room for the first time. And by the way, he knows I'm talking about this. I remember seeing his dorm for the first time and I was like, oh, versus mine, like everything was in place.
Yeah.
Because if it wasn't in a place, I didn't know where I put it.
Yep.
And his brain's like, everything has to be out where I can see it, because if it gets put in a place, I forget it exists. And so I would say that was one of our biggest areas of fighting, our disagreement, right? Of like me getting really anxious because I'd walk down the steps and there was like shit everywhere, especially when you have 3 kids and 2 dogs and guinea pigs and all the, the menagerie of animals. So my question for you is, first of all, I guess I want to know your personal story a little bit more, like how you got into this, because I think that what I've found is people who get into an area like this, especially one that has to do with a lot of traumatic stuff, there's typically some backstory to how they got there.
Yeah.
And then my other big question, and this is just like I think this is a selfish one, having worked with all the people that you've worked with, how do you see people bring their own trauma into their relationships, into their houses, and like how does that play out in terms of clutter and organization?
Yeah, I'm really excited about these questions right now.
Okay, cool. I'm gonna shut up so you can just like say all the things.
Okay, so my marriage was totally on the rocks. I don't know, what was that, like 6 years ago maybe. And it was because I was a stressed out disaster. My house felt like a disaster. I had a small child. I think my son was maybe 1. And I just remember being angry all the time and frustrated and feeling like I was constantly cleaning, but the house never felt clean and never felt put together, right? Like, and when you spend your entire day cleaning and you go to bed and the house is not clean, that does not feel good.
No.
And then when you wake up and you feel like you're back at square one, that doesn't feel good. So my marriage was totally on the rocks because my husband and I were just not connecting because I was just an angry person and frustrated. So I started watching Marie Kondo's Tidying Up just on a whim. And she had all of this clothing pulled out of a closet. And I looked at my husband and I was like, hey, can we try this? Like, something's got to give here. I'm miserable. I know you're miserable. Like, my husband and I, even though our marriage was on the rocks, we are very good communicators. And so like, I had enough awareness where I'm like, hey, I'm acknowledging that you're miserable and I'm trying to work on it. So can you give me some grace? So anyways, we started going through our clothing together. Like, we pulled everything out of the closets and drawers and everything. I had big piles on the floor. He had all of his stuff on the bed. And we sat in that room together and we went through items. And that was the first time in a while that we had really sat down and laughed with each other, because we were like looking at old clothes and just like talking about how ridiculous they were. Like, why on earth would we hold on to these things? It was just like funny. Or he'd hold something up. I'd be like, no, you look like garbage in that, throw that away. And
it's like true marriage right there. Like, we're not sugarcoating it. That's awful. Throw it away. Yeah.
Yeah. It was really fun. And then we started connecting. And then I realized, oh my gosh, when I walk in this bedroom and I actually have clothing items that fit my body as my choices for the day, my day feels a little easier. And then it was like, well, what else can I make feel easier? And it just spiraled from there. So, and it was a beautiful spiral because it has completely transformed my life and our home and my marriage. So that was really it. And then my husband he was a little more reserved as far as like, he didn't really want to get rid of his stuff. He was okay with going through the clothing. And one of the biggest things that people say to me is that they don't have a spouse or a partner who is on board with decluttering. That is like the number one excuse I hear from people. And first off, I see you. I totally get it. It's frustrating when you're gung-ho and the person in your home is like, no, 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 what are you doing? So I tell people all the time, just start on your own stuff. You've got plenty of things in your house to deal with that are your own. Start with your own stuff. Don't force them into it. Just like bring them along for the ride. And I would say like 99% of the time, they're at least a little more open to getting rid of stuff after they start to see the transformation.
You just said a whole word, because that is trauma work in general, right? So many people are like, I want a better relationship, or I want to feel better in my body, but like my partner's not. I'm like, okay, well, like, here's the thing. Like, what if we just do it for you? Like, what if we just work on your stuff? I like that you said, like, clean up your own part of the house first, like clean up your side of the street first. And guess what? Then if you're like, you know what, my partner's not doing it, they're not into it, they're not here. Guess what? You've just made yourself an incredible partner for someone else who like will participate in that. And I'm just thinking, like, you've just made your spaces in your home feel so much better, regardless of what anyone else is doing.
Absolutely. And it's kind of like you can feel a little more hands off with it too. Like if you've got your stuff on lockdown, like your stuff is good to go, then it feels less heavy because you're not necessarily dealing with partners' mess. It's still there.
One of the things that you taught me that I share it with people all the time, and I'm like, and I send people your way all the time.
Thank you for that.
Yes, because you were so helpful for me. I'm in my bedroom right now. I work from our bedroom. And the reason I'm able to work from our bedroom is because I decluttered our bedroom, and our bedroom feels really good, right? Yeah, there's some clothes over on my dresser right now. That's fine though, because I know where they go. They're easy to put away. I can tidy up the whole room in 5 minutes. Done.
It
right?
Feels manageable.
Yes. One of the things you taught me though, because we just did a massive decluttering of our home. Like I said, my husband is somebody who keeps, I'm somebody who's like, pitch it, we'll buy another one if we need it in a year or two, right? You taught me, if anyone in the home wants to keep something, you keep it.
Yeah.
And that was really hard for me at first. And then I realized, you know what? This is also boundary work of somebody setting a boundary and going, hey, I'm not ready to let go of this yet. And I would like that to be honored. And me going, okay, right? And the more that I was like, yeah, absolutely. If you want to keep it and you feel like you need to keep it, go for it. When we created that safety around it, he knew and the kids knew that they could keep anything they wanted to. They started letting more stuff go.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. Because they feel empowered to make decisions.
Yeah. It wasn't like I have to get rid of this because if I don't, I'm going to experience shame, or this person's not going to accept me. It's truly like they were able to go internally and go, do I want this?
Yeah. Oh, that makes me so happy.
Yeah, it was really cool. And so I tell people that all the time. And again, like there's so much connection between decluttering and organization and how you relate to your stuff and to other people through your stuff, and boundary work and emotional regulation and your past painful experiences. Because the way you keep your house is so based in how you were raised.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I love that you also are just so transparent about your marriage, because you know me, we're very transparent around our marriage. I'm like, we almost got divorced, guys. Like, it was great, right?
It is what it is.
So how do you, because you have 2 kids, Hank, who is gonna the kid, how do we describe Hank? I don't even know. He is one of my favorite humans that I've never met before, which I'd like to change. And then you have Cora, right?
Yes, Cora.
Okay. Yep. How old are they?
6 and 4.
Yeah. Hank's like 6 going on 26, so it's fine.
Oh my gosh, he's definitely an old soul.
Yes. He said the funniest things. Okay, I'm digressing. But anyway, they're young.
Yeah.
So how, as a parent, do you bring this decluttering and organization in? How are you teaching and modeling for them?
Yeah, so I'm so glad you asked this because I feel like with it, just within the last year, everything started clicking for the kids. So Hank, super messy. Like when I say go clean your room, he just shoves everything up to the wall and like creates a path through his room. And he's like so proud of himself. Like, Mom, I cleaned my room. And I promised myself I would never make them feel guilty or shameful about the state of their belongings because this is a journey. This is like a learning experience, right? They're a blank slate. I've got to teach them the tools. So Flora, on the other hand, I'll tell her, hey, go clean your room. And everything is like pristine, put away exactly where it goes. Yep. And I was like, I was thinking to myself one day, there is obviously a disconnect somewhere in what I've taught Hank and like how he's keeping his room. Like, why is he not understanding to put things in the bins where they go? So I sat him down and we were kind of talking about it. And he said, Mommy, will you teach me how to organize? And like, boom, it dawned on me. I'm like, I'm always in there. I empower him to make the decisions on what he wants to keep. But I was always putting everything away after we would go through things. I'm like, he has to put them away in a way that makes sense for his brain, not mine. Yes. So I was in the room with him. I'm like, okay, if you're going to use this notebook, like where would you be when you use this notebook? Where does it make sense to keep this item? And so once I started framing things in that context of like, where would you use it? Where would you like to keep it? What would you use with it? We could put all those things together. Then he started getting creative on how he wanted to store things. And now he can put things away where they go. But my biggest rule for myself was I just like being curious about why they behave and why they're putting things in certain places and why they want to keep things. I just wanted to be curious and not at all negative about what their thought process might be. So for them, it's been a journey too. The first time Hank and I decluttered, he maybe got rid of one thing and it was a struggle. He was like, I don't want to get rid of that. But like everything he just didn't want to get rid of. So I would ask questions and not make him feel bad. I would say like, okay, what if we just have this tub right here and we can only keep what will fit in the tub? And then that kind of forced him to make some decisions as far as like, okay, well, I like this better than that. And so just giving him calmly and kindly giving him those tools to really think through his belongings himself. And I would say for Hank, it took a good year for all of these lessons to sink in for him. And now he's 6 years old and he'll walk up to me with a handful of toys and be like, Mommy, I don't really use these anymore. Do you want to put them in the donate pile?
Yeah.
Heck yes, I do.
I love this. One of the things you're speaking to, and I actually feel like a lot of people have this, is like, you can't parent every kid the same way. You just can't, right? Their personalities are so different. I have one kiddo who is a lot like me, actually, like early bird, wakes up happy, like has a routine, does his things, and keeps his room incredibly neat. Doesn't play in there a lot, honestly, because he's like, I'd rather play downstairs, make a mess down there. Like, he's like, I like keeping my space really clean and like relaxed and restful for when I want to read or play with my guinea pigs or whatever.
I love that.
Right. I have another kiddo that is like, their room's a little disorganized, but the books are all in the same place and the clothes are all in the same place, even though they're in a pile, they're all, like, everything's in the same place. And then I have a kiddo that's like, it's chaos, right? Again, everything's out so they can see it, because if they can't see it, it disappears. And for a long time, like, just admitting this, I made the kid that has the chaotic room so wrong.
Yeah.
Their room would stress me out so badly. And what I realized was their room was triggering my threat response. because I could have never kept my room like that. And so my brain is going, their room is dangerous. They're going to get in trouble for keeping their room like this. This is bad. This is wrong. And so then I'm yelling at them, forgetting that like I'm the one getting them in trouble. I'm the one telling them it's wrong, which this is how generational trauma works, by the way, right?
Right.
So as soon as I was like, oh, this is actually a me problem, not a them problem. And by the way, this is also my kiddo that has rejection sensitivity. So when you tell them they're doing something wrong, it's very hurtful, feels very bad to them. They get rebellious. They go, fine, if I'm going to like make you upset, then I'm just going to like do the opposite of what you want. And so it was just like this really negative cycle. And so finally we sat down and I was like, look, I've been making you feel like shit about this and I'm owning this. So like, let's set some standards for ourselves that feel good for both of us. So what do you want? What do I want? How can I help you? And I have to say, like, it's so funny. I just walked by their room to say hi to them before we came on here. And I was like, hey, dude, you're doing a really good job in here. And they were like, thanks. And I was like, let me know if you need some help. Right. But it was like, they needed to understand why we cared about specific things because they didn't understand why we cared about specific things.
Yeah.
And they also needed to feel empowered. And like, I was disempowering them every time I came in there and told them like, oh my gosh, this isn't clean. Oh my gosh, this isn't right. So I just want to share that with anybody who is like, I had a parent like that, Lee, and I want to validate and witness their experience. And also anyone who's parented like that, like, first of all, be nice to yourself, please. Like you just said, change the language in your head.
Yeah.
And think about why. Really think about why their room is triggering you so much.
Yeah.
I know that you mentioned that you help people change the way that they talk to themselves in their brain. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes. My strategy is honestly just curiosity and asking questions. And I tell all my clients this, when I ask you a question, I am not expecting a certain answer. And I am also not asking the question to bring up any feelings around guilt or shame. We're just exploring like what's going on so we can change it. So I just say like, okay, you've got this pile here and it's pretty consistently here and it's the same types of things here. Like, what is making this location convenient for, like everything to be piled up there, and how do we work around that? So one huge thing that I love getting people to do is to accept that their house is not going to be perfect by society standards. Yeah. It's going to be perfect for their lifestyle. And so, yeah.
Wait. Say it again.
It is not going to be perfect by society standards, but it is going to be perfect for their lifestyle. So it feels pretty good when your house becomes this like well-oiled machine and it's supporting you instead of stressing you out all the time. But what that means typically is that your house is not going to look like the cover of Simple Living or what, a magazine. Right. It's not going to be picture perfect, but it's going to be so peaceful. And I love getting people to accept that. And honestly, I felt like I was doing a disservice to to my network, because I had a few people say to me, like all within a month, they were like, it makes me feel so much better when you say your house isn't perfect. And I heard that like 3 or 4 times in the same month. And I was like, why does everybody think my house is perfect? Well, I hadn't actually been saying like, your house doesn't need to be perfect, So it's very empowering when you can walk in your house and everything that you need is like readily available. You know exactly where it is. You're not searching for things, and getting people to accept that their habits are not bad and their habits are not shameful. They just are their habits, and you just get to rework things. And I always give this example, and sometimes I get sick of saying it because I feel like everybody's tired of hearing it, but they're not, right? Like I haven't talked to everybody in the world.
Broken record, baby. I'd be a broken record. Yes.
But I was so honestly rude to myself, because I would go upstairs every day to get ready for bed or to change my clothes or whatever. And I would throw my clothes on the floor and I would instantly be irritated with myself. Like, Brittany, you're so lazy. Why can you not walk this over to the hamper? Like, why are you so broken that you literally can't even walk your pants over to the hamper? Well, all I really needed to do was move the hamper to where I always took my clothes off.
I'm over here getting like defensive for you towards your brain. Like, don't talk to my friend like that. Right.
Right. I talk about my brain as like a separate person all the time.
Same.
And I'm like, I think that some people are like weirded out by that, but it is what it is. It is a separate person sometimes.
It is. That's like, it's conditioning. It's programming again, right? This is how I was taught to think about this instead of being taught, oh, I can move the hamper.
Right. And what was holding me back in a way is like, the hamper doesn't belong there according to society standards.
Yeah.
But society doesn't have to live in my house. I do.
Exactly. Like society doesn't have to be in this 2,000 square foot apartment or a house with 5 people and dogs and animals and everything everywhere.
Exactly.
I love this. We moved the kids' sock bin. So we used to keep everyone's socks in our room because they all wear the same, they trade out socks, like trying to have separate socks for every human. My husband and I share socks half the time, right? Like whoever's feet fit these, get these socks. So, but we had everyone's in our room, and it was frustrating because the kids would come in and be like, I need socks. And I'm like, I'm working, I'm doing whatever. And we probably did that for like a year. And then I was like, hold on. What if when we dump the laundry on our bed, we match all the kids' socks and then we chuck them down the stairs. And then when we go downstairs, we grab them and put them in a bin right by the front door that's right next to their shoes.
Beautiful.
Those children always have socks now. They know where they are. I'm not getting interrupted. And I'm like, it's literally the simplest thing. And by society standards, oh my gosh, you have an open sock bin like right by your front door? What are you doing?
I was just thinking that, like, you're not going to open up Pinterest and see a sock bin by the front door, right?
No. And you can find your balance of functional and aesthetic, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I can have it look perfect and have it be completely non-functional.
Yeah.
And stress me the F out. I can also have it be really, really functional and like look at it and go, oh, but like, I don't like the way that this looks or how it feels. So everyone has their own little balance of how that works.
Yeah. And it changes over time too.
Yeah.
And that's where I think at the end of doing the work of decluttering, they want it to be functional, right? Like they don't want to spend all this time working on it if it's not going to work out. But I always tell people it will change. Your home will change. These systems that you're creating right now, they're going to evolve. And they may end up being simpler, like somebody's going to get a new job or they're going to be going to a different school or something like you know what I mean? Like things are going to change in your daily routine that change the way your house needs to work.
Yeah. Or you're going to be like stuck at home with each other for 8 weeks in a pandemic. And you're going to be like, oh, this doesn't work.
This is not working. How can we simplify? How can we make this easier? And that is one thing I tell people too, like as you're going through your daily routines, just getting in the habit of really listening to what you're saying to yourself, because most of the time we're not fully aware of the damage that our thoughts are doing to our daily routines. And so like just being so in tune, like the example that you gave, like the kids are coming in your office to get socks and you're like, hey, I'm working. That was a frustration for you, that it was probably quick. So you didn't feel this huge need to get it rectified right away.
Yeah.
But in the moment when it was happening, it was irritating. So if we can get rid of all of those little tiny moments of irritation and frustration, your days are going to feel so much lighter and free.
Yes. Yes. I'm over here just like, you're preaching, Brittany. It's so good. So I have a question for you, because I also know that one of the tricks or tips that you have people do is if they're particularly sentimental things that it doesn't make sense for them to keep. Maybe there's 1,000 figurines from their grandmother or something like that, where they're like, I'm not going to put these on display. And also, they were my grandmother's. I love them. Like, what do you have, or how do you help people who maybe have a lot of sentimental attachment to things? Because, again, I'm one of those people that I'm like, even if it mattered to me at one point, if it's no longer functional to me, I'll just pitch it. And my husband's like, I don't understand. Like, how are you throwing that away? So for people who get really attached, how do you help them?
So first, I like to start with a reframe of we look at an item and we feel like we have to decide whether or not we want to keep it. And we always have this like stress around, oh, I'm getting rid of it. Is it the right thing to do? But instead, I would invite them to look at their items from grandma and decide what they absolutely love, like what brings up the most phenomenal memories, and what can you do with that item that is not shoving it in a box and putting it in the basement. Because the whole point of an item being sentimental is that it brings you joy consistently, not every 5 years when you're looking for that one thing that you need and you're going through every box in the basement, right?
Makes sense.
So I like to tell people quality over quantity for sure. So take 1 or 2 items that remind you of that person and put them out in your home somewhere. And this is another thing where your house isn't going to look like perfect by society standards, but it's going to bring you a ton of joy because you get to have these items that remind you of special people placed strategically throughout your home. And so one thing that I've done is I have this little tiny, I'm talking teeny tiny casserole dish, like maybe you get 5 bites out of whatever you cook in this thing. My husband's grandma was lactose intolerant, so I bought this little casserole dish so I could make her special food at holidays that she could eat. So when she passed away, I was really attached to that little casserole dish because it was like kind of our thing, you know, like I would bring the little casserole. So now I use it. I put my eyeshadow in it and I get ready with grandma in the morning because my eyeshadow's right there in the casserole dish. So would someone else put a casserole dish in their bathroom drawer? Maybe not, but I don't care. It works for me and I love looking at it.
Yeah.
So little things like that. You want to look at the quality over the quantity, and it can be very difficult, but also we get very attached to the outcome of donating. So we're like, this reminds me of grandma. I don't want to give it to just anyone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm more into like the woo, if you will. I will release and trust that the universe is going to get that to the person who needs it.
Yeah.
And if it ends up being a garbage dump, it is what it is, right?
Yeah.
I'm totally unattached to the outcome. If it ends up in a landfill, it is what it is, but I'm not going to know about it. I'm just going to trust that the universe is getting that thing to the person who desires it.
Yeah. Ooh, I love that. Something else you taught me is like you can take pictures of things.
Yes, I'm so glad you said that because I was going to bring that up. So what we're really craving is the memory, right? We don't necessarily care about that specific item. So I just take pictures of everything that I want to get rid of that may have some sort of sentimental value because I can go look at that picture whenever I want. And then I have the Time Hop app that shows you the pictures that you took this time last year and this time 2 years ago. And so it literally could pop up on my phone 1 time a year and I get to remember that person or that memory that it brings up. So I love taking pictures of it because you don't have to have the physical item in your home to be reminded of how that item is making you feel.
Yeah.
There was one other one too that is very important to me. People hang on to things because they feel sentimental, but when you really evaluate your feelings, it may not actually be the best memory. For example, I had a dress that I absolutely loved, but I wore it to the hospital when my grandmother broke her neck, and I wore it to a funeral for my great uncle, and then I wore it to a funeral for my other grandmother. And so every time I looked at that dress hanging in my closet, I was sad.
Yeah.
But that dress was like the perfect fit for my body. But I got rid of it because it didn't make me feel good. It's all about that. Like, if it's draining you energetically, then it doesn't have a place in your home.
That is such a, I never thought about that. It's such a good point. Yeah, there's clothes that things happened in that I had in my closet that I was like, why do I still have this?
Yeah. Or like I had clothing from, people that something that somebody had given to me, and that person and I just, we don't see eye to eye on something. So it's like just a reminder of this icky time. But then also I had, like, when my grandmothers were in the nursing home, I was buying things for them to, like, make sure they were taken care of and things like that. So then when they passed away and those items came into my home, I'm like, I don't want to remember the final days. I want to remember the good stuff. So it's like I got rid of all of the stuff that made me think of them being sad laying in a nursing home. Because I didn't feel good.
And I love that you're using that example because it's different for everyone. Because my grandmother was in a nursing home and we wrote her name on all of her hangers, and I still have a couple of the hangers. And so, like, when I see those in my closet, they make me happy because they remind me of when I actually got to live close to my Grammy. And she had pretty significant dementia at that point, but she was a freaking hoot. Like, at the end, she was actually really fun again after a while of not. So it just goes to show you, right? One item for someone can be actually kind of like re-traumatizing. And another item for someone can be, oh my gosh, it's just this really good memory of getting to actually spend time and like paint her nails and like bring her ice cream sundaes and things like that. So it just highlights the individuality of it, which I think is another big thing, because people shame themselves around, well, I should keep this or I should get rid of this because other people would keep this or get rid of this.
Yeah.
What's right for you?
Yeah. And I think the more you make those decisions, the easier it becomes to really embrace who you are and what works for your family. It does get easier and easier. Like, people come over to my house, and I have ADHD too. So I can understand I have to have piles of things in certain places strategically to remind me to do whatever, because I'm very out of sight, out of mind. Or I have to have things stored in a clear tub, because if it's in a colored tub, I'll never look in it again. It does not exist to me. So there's no shame anymore when somebody walks into my home and I've got a pile of stuff on the counter. That used to like stress me out, and I would feel all this like, oh, they're going to know I'm not perfect. Well, I'm not perfect.
Like, that's okay, right?
They're gonna know that I'm human.
They're gonna know, right? They're gonna know. Yeah, and it goes back to what you were talking about earlier on around people just making this assumption that you've got everything figured out and that everything's going to be perfect. My clients get so excited, and honestly, part of the kind of, I don't know if it's a little dark, twisty pleasure. Like, I like doing the podcast like this because I really want people to know how freaking imperfect I am.
Yes, because it's beautiful.
Yeah, right. First of all, it takes a lot of the pressure off for if and when we meet in person. Because you're like, Lee's kind of a goober. She's a goofball. She's not perfect. Because that in itself, again, is a mask. It's a level of organization that I do not want to ascribe to.
Yeah.
Right? Like, trying to keep everything in place all the time. I mean, I know I'm taking that a little more metaphorical, or I don't know if that's the right word, but what I've realized is that decluttering our house, organizing it in a way where everything that we have, I really enjoy. Everything that's in our home, I enjoy. It's also allowed me to really invest in some things that I wouldn't have necessarily spent money on before, because we're saving money on not bringing a bunch of other stuff into our home.
Yeah.
And that alone, like, when I walk into the kitchen and I see my Nespresso machine, like, I get so freaking excited. Like, I've only had this thing for 6 weeks. I've used it every day. I get so excited to walk into my kitchen and like see it on the counter, because I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have the best cup of coffee ever, right?
Yes.
And in order to get that, like, we got rid of our other coffee maker. We got rid of some other things because it made more sense to be like, this is the thing that we're investing in. So I don't really know where I'm going with this, but I have found that there's so much more capacity and space and physical regulation. The more I'm like you said, it doesn't have to work for anyone else. Doesn't work for me, doesn't work for us.
Yeah. Well, and what you were saying about your Nespresso machine, you also don't have to work hard to get that wonderful cup of coffee because you've set up this system for yourself where you don't have to do all the dishes in the morning to be able to have the cup of coffee, right? So I feel like when you create those little pockets of joy and they're just readily available for you to enjoy them, it's a game changer.
Yes. We actually, and you're talking about those little moments of irritation. We've started having the kids put the dishes away. They unload the dishwasher and I'm like, oh, we need to declutter the cups again because they're like, I don't know how to fit this in here. And like everything's all over the place. And I don't mind if everything's all over the place as long as I can easily find the thing. And there's too much stuff in there that like we're not using. So even like 3 days ago, I was like, we get to do this because again, it's getting to the point that, okay, things have changed. The kids can reach the cups now. And so they're putting them in weird places. So we have to come up with a different system. I think a lot of us make ourselves wrong for when those things change. And something that I really like to tell my clients, and this is more from a business structure, but it applies here too, is like, if the system stops working, if the tool stops working, it's not a you problem. It's a system and a tool problem.
Yes. Yes.
Right? You don't have to bend and contort yourself in a weird way to like get the system and the tool to still work. Like, let's just find a different system or tool because you've grown, things have changed, and trying to get yourself back to how it was, the likelihood of us doing that is pretty low. And do you even want to go back?
Right.
And also, it's so much easier to just be like, oh, let's change the way we arrange the cups. That's it.
And nobody needs to feel bad about it.
No.
If you want to go buy a new cup today, you can still do that. There's like no shame around it, right? Like you can, because it's yours, it's your space, you can finagle it however you want.
Yeah. And you and I both got our ADHD diagnoses, I think, like close to each other this year.
Yes, because I saw yours. I was like, oh, I'm not alone.
Right. And I think taking the external clutter piece and going internally around it too has just been so beautiful of like, what routines am I, or like what practices, what habits am I hanging on to that I could let go? Like, what thoughts am I hanging on to that I could let go? How can I declutter my internal space as well? So one of the things that I let go of was being an early bird.
Yes.
We live in the Northern Hemisphere, kind of up there.
Yeah.
In Ohio. And it's, I don't know, how warm is it out today? Like 20 degrees outside today.
It's supposed to be like 9, like in a couple days. So
it's the second shortest day of the year, right? Me dragging my butt out of bed at 5:30 to like go work out and journal and meditate and do all those things. Like, no, that was a system for a really long time that I was like, oh, early birds, like that's how you stay organized. That's how you get all this stuff done. The early bird gets the worm. Like entrepreneurship, especially the miracle morning, get up and do all these things before the sun rises. What I realized is I'm an early bird in the summer. When the sun rises at 5:45, sure. Yeah. I realized I wake up with the sun.
So, and that's okay.
Yes. So like coming up with this new system of, okay, I'm going to let myself sleep in until 7 and like not make myself wrong for that. It was huge because I actually get more done now and I'm more rested and it just feels generally better. And so I think a lot of people don't think about that as decluttering.
Yeah.
But it is.
It totally is. Anytime you're like simplifying your space and making and your routine and your actions, like, and you're not making yourself wrong for it. Like, is there anything more beautiful than that? I don't think there is.
Yeah. Like, you can clutter your schedule.
Yes. I have a friend, and she would pack her schedule, and she finally realized it was like a trauma response to stay busy.
We might know that.
We might know this person.
This friend.
And she,
the second you said it, I was like, oh, nope, I know. It's a mutual friend. I got it.
Yeah. And she's like shared that before. It's like, I was staying busy, not because I had to.
It's one of the most common trauma responses I see. It's flight energy. It's avoidance. Because if you declutter your schedule, you are left alone with your body and your brain.
Yeah. And it can feel very scary because I have the same tendencies to like stay busy, because if I'm busy, I don't have to do the things. I'm always doing something, right? Or I was always doing something. So it's like I never had time to do the real work that was going to help me.
One of the most common things I hear from people with the TRIPS program, our trauma-informed psychologically safe certification. I did a podcast on it last week about why you should join. And one of the biggest obstacles I hear people say is because they don't have time or they don't have capacity. And in reality, I'm never going to tell somebody like, no, that's not it.
Right.
Like, I validate the feeling of there not being time and there not being capacity. And my question back is always like, and it's not a judgmental why. It's a curious, like you said, it's a curious why. Why? What else are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so many people I talk to are like in this flight trauma response of like, I'm going to avoid thinking about any of this and just keep myself super busy and like moving until I pass out at night. Because if I stopped and cleared some of this away, I'm going to have to look at some uncomfortable shit.
Yeah. And you're going to be alone with your thoughts.
Right. And so I'm like, hey, why don't you come into the TRIPS program with us and not be alone with your thoughts? Come be with 50 plus other people who are also having some similar experiences. Cause I know what this feels like. I worked 80-hour weeks.
Yeah.
I worked 80-hour weeks. So to keep myself distracted from all of the things. And I know you worked a full-time job plus your business on the side. So you were probably pulling what, 50, 60 hours?
Oh yeah, easily. I had a full-time job. I had 3 VA clients and my own business. And I was just like, I mean, I felt like I did not even have a moment to myself.
Yeah. And people are like, oh my gosh, like I don't have any free time. Like I wish I could just have time to myself. And I'm like, do you though?
Yeah.
Like, and again, I'm not judging.
Right.
There's zero judgment because I was there. I gotta tell you, like when you just sit there and you're alone with your shit, you're like, oh, there's some really, and it's the same thing as decluttering. We had 10 years of stuff in our basement and our garage. We filled an entire dumpster. And 4 van loads, like seats down, 4 van loads of donations. We still have a couple that we're sending on every now and then. And
I love that so much.
And there was some stuff in there that was uncomfortable to look at, right? Yeah. There was some stuff that was from previous places in our lives that I was like, ugh. And it's the same. Internally, you've kept memories, you've stored trauma, you've stored patterns, programming, conditioning, thoughts, all of those things. So the goal is to feel empowered and that you have full agency to decide, is this something I'm keeping or is this something I'm letting go?
Yes. Yeah. And when you're in that scenario or someone else is in that scenario and you're trying to be supportive, just constantly validating people is the way to go. Because I tell you, if somebody swoops in, like if I've got a donate pile out and somebody is like, oh my gosh, you're getting rid of that. You could do it. You could use it for this or that. It like instantly I'm like so defensive and I have to remind myself that's a them thing. That's not a me thing.
Yes. And it's the opposite too of like, why haven't you gotten rid of that already?
Yes.
Right. I think so many of us don't declutter either emotionally, mentally, internally versus externally because we're making ourselves wrong for like having waited so long. And it's this self-fulfilling prophecy of of, oh, well, like I've waited so long. Like I should have done this 5 years ago. So let me not do it again today because I'm too busy shaming myself over not doing it 5 years ago. Instead of just being like, okay, yeah, could I have done this 5 years ago? Sure. Am I doing it today? Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that because 5 years ago, if you would have tackled it, the outcome would have been totally different than if you do it today.
Yeah. It's been really interesting. This last declutter that we did, I saw a huge change in my husband. And I think it was legit because I wasn't pressuring him. I was like, hey, I feel like we're ready to do this. And he's like, you know what? I'm ready to do this. And it was really hard for him. It was really hard at moments. Like he had to take breaks. He had to do some stuff to help emotionally regulate. And I at times had to be like, hey, I'm going to just let you have your time here. I'm going to walk away. You let me know when you're ready to start again. It was hard. It was really hard. And there was just this moment that I saw click in him about halfway through. And by the way, my husband's doing all this external cluttering after he's just done a lot of like his own internal. He went through the TRIPS program. So like he just did all of his internal decluttering, right?
Yeah.
And there was just this moment where he was like, you know, I'm forgiving myself for, and like I'm showing myself so much compassion for having hung on to these things. And also I'm good.
Yes. I love that.
So I just want to share that as evidence for people because honestly, I got really comfortable with just being like, you know what? I might live in a messy house for the rest of my life, and that's fine. Let me figure out what I need in order to be able to stay regulated and have functionality in this house with 4 other humans who aren't at that level. And that's okay. And I feel like that acceptance was what actually shifted things.
Yeah.
So.
That's so beautiful. It's so liberating when you finally start to understand why you have the thought patterns that you have, why you have certain behaviors. And like, instead of being wrong for them, you can just tweak them shame-free.
Yeah. And honestly, if you wanting to declutter your external space or your internal space, even that reason alone is a reason to come join us at the Institute, because think of how much money and time and energy you will save. That is a reason enough on its own to just be like, yep, I'm doing the TRIPS program. And plus you've got me, you know, you got Brittany there too. And we're going to be like validating you every step of the way.
So strongly. Like,
I know.
validate.
I know. I think that that's like one of the things that makes our program just so different from everywhere else is people will be like, hey guys, I only yelled at my kids 17 times today instead of 27. We're like, oh my gosh, that is amazing. Like, great job, right? Because that matters. It makes a difference. You know,
it feels safe to do better.
Yes. And not better, again, coming back to your thing of society standards, not better by society standards, but better by your own internal metrics. The word that is coming up for me for 2023 is integrity. And I feel like the more you're able to look at your stuff and the more you're able to go, does this work for me? Does it not? How do I want to use this? How do I want to show up moving forward? The more I can act in integrity with what I've decided is what works for me, the better. And the more I validate myself when I notice myself acting in integrity and in alignment with how I want to show up, the more I want to do it.
Yes. So beautiful.
Okay, well, I can talk. Wait, no, please.
I did want to say one thing because you brought up a good point, and I kept thinking about it as we were talking, and my ADHD was like, no, we're not going to remember that. So I remember now, but you were talking about saving money, and one thing that is so common in people with ADHD, I'm sure a lot of people know this, but you're impulsive. Sometimes, like a lot of us are impulsive. So I'm an impulse buyer, and I also like to have complete sets of things. So like I just threw away a ton of vitamins because I put them in the cabinet. And I knew I would never take them if they were in the cabinet because I would not see them and they would not exist in my world. And so I just threw away a bunch of vitamins, and I was at peace with it because I was like, you know what? That was a boatload of wasted money. It was probably close to $200 or $300. in vitamins. But the reason why I had so many and so many different bottles is because I felt like I had to have this complete set, and it was an impulse buy. Like I couldn't just try one. I had to try all the different ones. So anyways, just giving myself the grace to get rid of that. But now when I'm online shopping and I have this urge to buy $300 worth of vitamins, I can say, oh, that's my brain just telling me that like I need to try them all. I need to have the complete set and like blah, blah, blah. And now I'm like, it is safe to just get one and try it out. So it's saving me tons of money because I'm actually able to think about why I am purchasing things versus just purchasing.
Yeah. One of my favorite things too has been, I love this because I didn't even realize I've been doing this more, but I have, because there was a lot of conditioning around money, which we have a couple episodes on money and I've talked about it a lot. I'm bad with money. I'm not good with money. And so like the story of that just kept playing out. So if you believe that about yourself, that's how you're going to act. So shifting to, I'm somebody who's actually really, really decisive and strategic about money. So one of my favorite things to do now is I ask myself the question of, do I have to buy this today? Right? Is there actual scarcity? Right? Is this something that I want? And if I don't buy it right now, it legitimately probably won't be here tomorrow. Okay. I would say 95% of the time, the answer to that is no.
Right.
And so I go, okay, great. Put it in the Amazon cart, make a mental note, text your husband and tell him you like it because he keeps lists of things that I like. So when he needs to buy me a present, he can go on his list. That's how he does that.
That's so smart. I love that.
It's so cute. I love it. He has he has whole lists. Then I go, okay, if it's here, let's just give ourselves a day. Right. And it's this beauty of, I trust myself to know if I want something or not in the moment. And also I give myself permission to give it a minute.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing as getting rid of something, right? Like you don't have to decide in that exact moment, am I getting rid of this or not? Like you can put it out on your desk and take a look at it and feel it and be like, actually, I do kind of like, now that it's out and in front of me, like I do like looking at this versus like, you're like, no, this isn't functional. I don't like it. Let me get rid of it. Right. It doesn't have to be this, I must decide right now.
Right. Yeah.
And I've actually not bought a lot of things that way.
Yeah.
And again, the Nespresso machine, I was like, the second I get home, like Black Friday, I was like, the second Black Friday starts, that's getting bought. Right.
And you're so intentional about it, which is beautiful.
Yeah, it was so intentional. And I felt the difference between that and some of the other purchases. And so like, that's the other piece of starting to declutter too, is you get to know your yes and your no better.
Yes.
Of like, ooh, yes, this feels really good versus like, no. And then you also are able to lean more into that I don't know state and like give yourself the space to figure out if it's a yes or a no instead of like forcing yourself to make the decision.
That's so beautiful. And I have not actually thought about that, but yeah, I can feel it in my body when it's like a major yes and I don't know, or a definite no. Like I don't even really have to like think about it anymore.
Yeah. There are purchases now. I think about my yellow purse. It's my absolute favorite color. It's more than I ever spent on a purse. We were riding down the escalator. Lee and I were in Macy's and I saw it in front of me and I made eye contact with that purse. And then I made eye contact with Lee and he was like, go get it. Like he knew. And being able to have that kind of intuitive knowing of what is right versus what isn't, and also knowing what my bank account looked like and feeling into all of those things. There's no shame. There's no guilt. It's just like, yeah, that fits in with what I'm trying to create versus maybe not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
I feel like I could talk to you forever. So
I know. I cannot believe this much time has passed already.
I know. I was like, we got to end this. So where can people find you if they want help, support? I mean, obviously they can come in the TRIPS program and you have your own spaces that are fabulous where people can focus specifically in on decluttering. So
yeah, so you can always go to my website, clutterhq.com. It is a bit under construction at the moment, but that should be changing soon. I have a Facebook group where I put in free resources, and it's the Livin' Simply movement.
Living or live-in?
Livin', baby. Livin'.
So no G. Okay.
No G.
Okay.
Livin' Simply movement.
We'll link in your website and your Facebook group down in the show notes. And if you're in the Becoming Trauma Informed Facebook group, Brittany's the one you chat with too. So now you have a voice to the name and a face to the name.
Yeah, so please add me as a friend. I love when Lee's network adds me as friends because I'm like, oh, we're like-minded individuals. Yes, thank you.
Oh, there was one more thing I wanted to say. Oh, you often too, you host like these really, I don't like the word affordable because it's so individualized, but like $11, $22 decluttering experiences that are phenomenal, y'all. So
thank you. Yeah, I mean, my decluttering sprints are they're usually under $20 because I really want to give people some quick wins at a low cost so they can start to feel relief. Like when somebody comes to me and says that they feel relieved, my goals for life have been met.
I love it. Yeah. So if you're somebody that's like, oh, I'd actually like to do, I like how you call them sprints too. They're not challenges.
I used to say challenge and it just didn't feel good.
Well, and the other piece too is I like sprint because you think like, okay, I'm going to just do this. I'm going to get in. It's a quick thing. It's fast and that's it. And also like if people are turtle crawling, you're cool for that too.
Absolutely. If you exit the program just touching your coffee mugs, I'm good with that. If that helped you.
Yeah, right. If you even I was watching this TikTok the other day of this woman that's like, do you realize how much your a square foot of your apartment or your house costs? She's like, sometimes I just go stand in a random corner and I think like I'm standing on $6 right now, right? Like even if you clean out a $4 square area of your house or your apartment, like good for you.
Yes, you're getting your money's worth for that.
Exactly.
Square.
I love that. She's like, do you ever just touch your ceiling? Like, and just think like, this is an investment, but it all adds up.
It does.
It all makes a difference.
I tell people all the time, like your house is your most expensive, whether it's an apartment, condo, house, whatever, like your house is your most expensive asset. And it is the thing that we mistreat the most. And it is the thing that brings us the most frustration sometimes.
Right. It's your most important and valuable external asset, right?
Yeah.
Because I also think, we've been talking internal clutter, like your body and your nervous system are your most important, like internal assets.
Yeah.
So decluttering those too and not mistreating those. And I don't mean mistreating them with like food and I mean mistreating them by like being mean to yourself.
Yeah.
Let's not be mean to your house and let's not be mean to you. So
yes.
All right. Well, thank you for joining me so much. We hope to see you in Brittany's spaces and in our combined space at the Institute. And we will see you next week. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Invitation to head to our show notes to check out the offers and connections we mentioned. Or you can just head straight over to institutefortrauma.com and hop in our email list so that you never miss any of the cool things that we're doing over at the Institute. Invitation to be well and to take care of yourself this week, and we'll see you next time.